We know which teams Iran will be playing at the 2023 Asian Cup, but now it is time to analyze the opponents. On today's episode, we will take a look at the national team of Palestine and update you on the Persian Gulf Pro League. You know the deal, and you know what time it is. It's time for Team Melli Talk. Can the national team of Palestine create trouble for Iran? Hey everyone, welcome back to Team Melli Talk. For today's episode, I had the opportunity to interview Bassil Mikdadi of Football Palestine. Hope you enjoyed the interview. But before we get to the interview, I would just like to pay tribute to Andy Smart. Andy was an actor, a comedian, and a huge football fan. He was also one of the stars of a documentary called The Outsiders. It was in this documentary where Andy and his good friend Nick Hancock got to follow the national team of Iran at the 1998 World Cup in France. Andy shared that it was one of the funnest summers of his life. And I actually had the honor of getting to interview Andy Smart on Team Melli Talk nearly 1 year ago. If you haven't watched the interview, I strongly recommend you do. Andy shared some really cool stories. And of course, I would just like to send my condolences to the friends and family members of Andy Smart. He was a great guy, he loved life, and we will all miss him. Okay, everybody, and for this edition of Team Melli Talk, we're continuing our analysis of Group C at the 2023 Asian Cup. As we know, in Iran's group, it is Iran, United Arab Emirates, Palestine, and Hong Kong. And joining me for today's edition of Team Melli Talk, his name is Bassil Mikdadi, joining us all the way from Amsterdam. Bassil, welcome to Team Melli Talk. It's great to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me on. And I'm looking forward to analyzing Group C, and I'm even looking more forward to this game against Palestine and Iran in Group C. January can't come soon enough for me.
All right, and yes, looking forward to that too. Can't wait. We'll talk more about the venue of where this tournament will be held a little bit later as well. Of course, to our viewers though, if you want to find Bassil Mikdadi and how he contributes to to covering the national team of Palestine, you can find him, of course, on Twitter. The handle here is Football Palestine. And as we're getting started, Bassil, tell me about how long you've been following the national team of Palestine, and also about the website that's also connected to your Twitter account. I believe it's Football Palestine. Is that correct? .com.
Yeah, that's right. So it's been a labor of love, a long journey. I started, wow, about 15 years ago now. I was still in university, wanted a forum to speak about Palestinian football. And a friend of mine started a blog spot. It was originally footballpalestine.blogspot.com. That's how long ago it was. I joined a little bit later, and things sort of evolved quite nicely. It was a dovetail with the evolution of the national team. And from a tiny blog that was more like rantings of two fans, it evolved into a proper news service, standalone website, Twitter. And now we also do premium analysis over on Substack for our hardcore fans who want to really get into games. So I was at the 2015 Asian Cup in Australia, the 2019 Asian Cup in the UAE, and hoping to be at the next one in Qatar, and hoping to be amongst the fans for, well, maybe not amongst the fans, I'll be in the press box, unfortunately, but hoping to be at the State of Education City come January.
And before we get into some more of the details about the national team of Palestine, you actually know a lot about Team Melli, the national team of Iran. I mean, tell us about that. You covered them at a couple tournaments.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to cover Iran for the Totally Football Show podcast with James Richardson at the 2018 World Cup and the 2022 World Cup. Yeah, I think Iran is obviously, first and foremost, fascinating country, fascinating culture, and the football team is great. Yeah, I really like the players and the type of football that Iran produces. It's a very nice mix of technicality and also physicality. Uh, and I think they produce a certain moxie when the team plays. So was fortunate enough to cover them and got to learn a lot about just the really, really good players that form, I think, probably one of the best generations in Iranian football history.
Some basics about the national team of Palestine. Their head coach is Makram Daboub of Tunisia. And I believe, he's been, when I was taking a look at your website, it looks as if, things are really going well recently for the national team of Palestine. But first, I want to go back a little bit to, some previous tournaments. You talked about the 2015 Asian Cup, and I remember Palestine qualified to that tournament because they won the AFC Challenge Cup, I believe, 1 year before that. And great that they won that tournament, got them a ticket to the Asian Cup. In the previous Asian Cup, 2019 in the UAE, Palestine, they got 2 points in that tournament. Two of those draws that they were against Syria and against Jordan, both of them were scoreless draws. So from your point of view, were you a little disappointed that Palestine was unable to score a goal in that tournament?
Yeah, for sure. It's a little anticlimactic. I'll track back a little bit and we'll talk kind of about the evolution, because you mentioned the first qualification, which is almost 9 years to the day now, when they managed to do that. And Palestine, they spent a couple of years in international wilderness. They had more success at the outset. So for people who don't know, there's a very long history of over a century of the game being played in Palestine. And they were admitted as FIFA members under the British mandate in 1928. But then, Palestinian football didn't disappear, but in its official auspices, the FA wasn't recognized up until 1998 when they gained FIFA status. And we had, I think, a lot more success at the, let's say, first 7 years of our existence than the latter 7 years. And being able to qualify for that 2015 Asian Cup was an inflection point. It really changed everything, because the national team really didn't have much direction, and the AFC didn't help Palestine either, because half of, not just us, but half the continent was shut out of Asian Cup qualifying proper. So the only way for us to qualify, we were not entered into the qualifying tournament. We had to win this thing called the Challenge Cup in order to qualify. So we qualified for a 16-team Asian Cup that way, which I will argue to the death that that's actually a lot harder to do than going through Asian Cup qualifying, because it's a tournament. If in the knockout stage you have a bad day, someone gets sent off, then that's it. So we managed to do that. I think we were sort of happy to be at our first Asian Cup. Tough group too. 2007 holders Iraq, the current holders at that time Japan were in the group, and Jordan, who came within 1 game of qualifying for the World Cup in 2014, were also in that group. So we were just happy to be there. We didn't prepare very well. I think we took a lot of those learnings and we put it into the next cycle. Unfortunately, we sort of, I think, peaked a little bit too early. We peaked in 2017. We made a coaching change that really wasn't necessary, followed by another coaching change that also wasn't necessary. And we came in disorganized. And yeah, we got 2, you could say, positive results, right? Because we hadn't registered a point at an Asian Cup up until getting that draw in the opening game against Syria. But it was not nice to watch. It was very ugly. And I would say that from our perspective as fans, I think Syria, Jordan, obviously Australia were the holders at the 2019 tournament. All really good teams by Asian standards. But when Arab teams play each other, it's a derby, and it doesn't really matter who's stronger than whom. All that goes out the window. And I thought we respected Syria and Jordan a little bit too much. We could have gotten more out of those games. And I thought we also respected Australia a little bit too much, because if you remember how that Asian Cup panned out, Australia lost its opening match to Jordan, and they were under more pressure than us going into that second game. We got the 0-0 draw. We played most of the second half down to 10 men. So we had 1 point and they had 0, and we could have put them under a lot more pressure. Instead, we completely capitulated. We had like a must-win game against Jordan that also ended up being a 0-0 draw. I thought we didn't go for it. We played too cautious, and there was really no reason to do that. So yeah, disappointed, because there were teams that made it out of the group. It was a 24-team Asian Cup. I don't think, all due respect to the teams that did manage to make it out, but I don't think Vietnam or Kyrgyzstan or these other teams that had managed to get out of the groups were really any better than us. So yeah, it left a bitter taste in my mouth and in the mouth of a lot of other fans. But I think you also have to consider that for 2014 Asian Cup, we were handed a very, very tough group. I mean, Jordan was the 4 seed in that group, and Syria had been in the playoff against Australia to go to the 2018 World Cup. Australia were the holders, so it was a tough group in and of itself, right? And Jordan ended up winning it; and they were the 4 seed. So, at least this time around, I think the draw was a little bit kinder, and that should help us register our first ever win at an Asian Cup.
Now let's focus real quick on 2022 World Cup qualifying. I was taking a look at the results recently. Palestine, had some very good results. A 2-0 victory over Uzbekistan. That was huge. A scoreless draw against Saudi Arabia. I mean, that was, in my opinion, that had to have been a moral victory for the diehard Palestinian football supporters. But then also during that qualification campaign, a loss to Singapore and a loss to Yemen. So clearly, this is one of those situations where you say that Palestine has been making a lot of improvements, but they still suffer from what's called inconsistency.
Yeah, I think the best way to kind of describe the way World Cup qualifying went was we really couldn't get out of our own ways. And I know that a lot of fans of the Iranian national team will point out, the FA doesn't do this, doesn't do that, doesn't arrange friendlies. They will point out the shortcomings of the Iranian FA. I will promise them, as a fan of Palestinian football, that their FA is like light years ahead of ours. And I would say that the biggest thing holding us back during World Cup qualifying was the coach. And I mentioned the coaching changes that were made between 2017 and 2019. I'll delve into that a little bit more. So, in 2017, we reached an all-time best ranking of 73 in the FIFA ranking. That was good enough to be, I think, the top 8 Asian team. So we did really, really well. World Cup qualifying didn't work out for us for 2018. We were a pot 3 team. We got Saudi Arabia, which was a pot 2 team, and we got UAE, which was a pot 1 team, and they were coming off of a great run at the Asian Cup in Australia in 2015. We gave it a go, couldn't get to round 3, but in Asian Cup qualifying proper, we won all our games. The only game we lost was the last one against Oman. It was a dead rubber. We had both qualified. Now, before that dead rubber game, the coach that led us on a 10-match unbeaten streak. We won all our matches in 2017. We were flying in Asian Cup qualifying. For whatever reason, the FA decided to make a coaching change. It was really bizarre. They brought in a Bolivian coach by the name of Julio Cesar Valdivieso. And, immediately when this happened, fans were super upset. It was quite reasonable for them to be upset. The FA felt the pressure, and then going into that game against Oman, this guy was given an ultimatum. Listen, either if you lose this game, you're going to be out. You can draw, you can win, but you cannot lose. 85th minute, we concede a goal. It ends 1-0 to Oman. He's fired. And now the logical thing to do would be to bring back the old coach, Abdel Nasser Barakat. But the FA didn't want to be seen to give in to the demands of the fans. So they brought back the old staff minus the head coach himself. So the man in charge was the physical preparatory coach, and I'll give him a lot of credit. I think he's a fantastic physical preparatory coach. Like, we've never had any issues with fitness as long as this guy was around. And I think a lot of Arab teams in particular, they're quite poor from a fitness standpoint, right? You can sometimes see that after the 60th, 70th minute, they drop off. We didn't have those problems with that guy. That's going to be the only nice thing I'll say about Nuruddin Walid Ali. His style of football was very negative. I mean, he wanted to play bunker ball, and he would play bunker ball in instances where we were the better team. And you can play bunker ball against the Saudi Arabia, you can play bunker ball against Iran, Australia, South Korea, Japan, the big boys of Asia, that's fine. But you cannot play bunker ball against Singapore and Yemen. And what happened in qualifying was, I think Uzbekistan were having their own problems with Hector Cooper. The game was in Palestine. We have great players, so they came to play. We got the first goal, and things just went our way, and we won that game. But immediately, like that game against Singapore, we went back to low block, just trying to play long ball, and this plays into the hand. Like you're not putting four teams under pressure, and that's why we lost to Singapore and Yemen. You mentioned Saudi Arabia being a moral victory. I think that was maybe. I understand that this is a strong team that beat Argentina at the World Cup and all that, but if you're interested, you can go back and look at the highlights of that game. I swear to you, we should have won that game 2 or 3-0. So it felt a little bit that we left something out on the table. Obviously, again, we ended up in a situation where our ranking was not at the right level at the right time, because we made it all the way up to top 8 in Asia, and we needed to be in top 16 to be at least a pot 2 team, and we were the 17th team, and we missed out on the 16th place by like a fraction of a point. And that meant, again, you're in pot 3. Again, you end up in a tough group. Saudi Arabia was the pot 1 team. Uzbekistan was the pot 2 team. The only thing we managed to do really was send Uzbekistan home early, because they obviously have the tradition of making the playoff and bowling at the last minute. Thanks to that win, we sort of rained on their parade as well. But we do feel, as fans collectively, that we left a huge opportunity to qualify, because if you look at the calculus to advance, we got 2 points against Saudi Arabia and UAE in 2018 qualifying, and then we did the maximum against the weaker teams in the group. And so our thinking was, okay, if we can turn those 2 points into 4 points and get maximum points against the pot 4 and pot 5 team, then we can advance to round 3. And we did. But the frustrating thing was that we did that. We got the 4 points. We got the win and the draw against Saudi Arabia. So we did what was needed, the hard part. And then the easy part, we failed at. So I mean, a lot of frustration. We stuck with Walid Ali for too long, and then it took basically a complete collapse against Saudi Arabia in the game away to actually get him fired. It was a relief that we got fired. I didn't even care about the historic loss. And then once Mekram Debuk came in, we destroyed Singapore and Yemen. We beat them 4-0 and 3-0 respectively. So that's in the past now. We've played that World Cup, so we don't need to talk about it anymore. And now we're just hoping that we can really push forward at this Asian Cup and at the next World Cup qualifying cycle, which will begin even before we get to the Asian Cup finals.
Next thing I want to shift to those, I want to talk about the different contingents, I like to call, on the Palestinian national team. First, I want to start with the Chilean contingent. The players I'm talking about, of course, Jonathan Cantillana, Joaquin Abdallah, Nicolas Zidane, and also Yashir Islameh. The last 2 players I mentioned, Zidane and Islameh, they both have represented Chile at the U20 level. So, from what, for you, from your point of view and what you have observed, what do these players really, how have they really changed the dynamic and the chemistry for the national team of Palestine?
Yeah, well, I'll speak before about Yasser Islami and Jonathan Cantillana, because they came in at around the same time. Nicolas Zidane, Joaquin Abdallah, they're younger players, and they played only a couple of games with the national team. I think both Jonathan and Yasser, they gave a lot to the national team. Yasser in particular came at a time where we were really struggling. We didn't have a number 9, and he came in and he slotted in great. And he scored some big goals in qualifying for the last Asian Cup. Jonathan as well was part of that cycle, World Cup qualifying, Asian Cup qualifying, also put in some big goals. I think it's a testament, though, to the evolution of Palestinian football, that those players aren't guaranteed a spot at this following Asian Cup, because we have so many good players coming through the pipeline. And that's a little bit hard for me to swallow, because I think they're fantastic players, and we've got great memories of what they've done in a Palestine shirt. Yasser Islami in particular. So to kind of not see them there is a bit tough, right? Because you have like an emotional connection to the great memories they provided you. But definitely, when they came into the fold around 2015, 2016, a big boost, because these were positions that we didn't have. We didn't have a guy who could play centrally in a creative role. We didn't have a number 9, and they really came in and took us to the next level. As far as Nicolas Vedan and Joaquin Abdallah are concerned, it's a little bit strange. We'll see how if they can force their way in, because these are guys that were struggling for playing time in Chile, and then made the decision to move to Palestine to play for one of the big clubs, to play for Shabab al-Khalid, the Hebron-based club. Joaquin Abdallah has had a better time of it than Nicolas Zidane. They joined in January, so they only got a half season. They'll have an off season under their belts, and have a complete season, or at least, 2 parts of 2 seasons, so kind of a complete season going into an Asian Cup. And we'll see if they can force their way in to an expanded Asian Cup squad. But I think it's really a testimony to how good Palestinian football is, that a generation ago, we were talking the early 2000s, and there was a guy playing in Chile. Not only would he be guaranteed a spot on the team, he'd be like a guaranteed starter. And now, we're actually producing talent at home that, it's not exactly a guarantee that if you play abroad that you will be a starter or even a member of this team.
Okay, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed the analysis of the Palestinian national team. This analysis will continue in our next episode. We will learn about the rising star of the Palestinian national team, and we will also learn about potential dual nationals who may switch their allegiance to represent the national team of Palestine. And of course, we will also analyze Palestine's chances at the 2023 Asian Cup. It is official. Paris Police are the champions of the Persian Gulf Pro League after a 4-0 victory over Nasaji Mazandaran. Paris Police had a 2-0 lead at the half. The goals in the first half were scored by Ali Nemati and Saeed Sadeghi. The 2 goals in the second half were scored by Soroush Rafieh and Milad Sarlak. Both goals were scored from long range. You gotta love it. Congratulations to Paris Police, and of course, congratulations to head coach and Team Melli legend, Yahya Gol Mohammadi. Yes, the Persian Gulf Pro League is done, but there are still the semifinals of the Hazfi Cup. Esteghlal will face Nasaji Mazandaran, and Paris Police will face Havadar. If the 2 Giants of Tehran win, we will see another Tehran derby. And that's it, everybody, for this edition of Team Melli Talk. As always, really do appreciate the support. Make sure you get to our website, www.teammelitalk.com. Remember, this is your best source for the latest news on Team Melli, the national team of Iran. Make sure you find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You know the handle, @Team Melli Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit that notification button. See you on the next edition of Team Melli Talk.